We're so glad that you could join us here today for this as we examine ways to lower supply and service costs for any size medical office using a medical group purchasing organization, or GPO. GPOs are a way to even the playing field in today's highly competitive medical market and help independent providers stay independent. As I said, our speaker is Peter Wincup, who is the founder and owner of the Wincup Group, which is an affiliate sponsor for the Premier GPO program. Peter has over 25 years of corporate business experience in the chemicals and plastics industry, and during these years he's had many titles, including General Manager, Director of Purchasing, Director of Materials Management, Director of Customer Service, Sales Manager, Senior Manager, Director, Purchasing, Sourcing, and Supply Chain Management Specialist. And so he is very well equipped to talk to us today about GPOs, because for the last 8 years he has owned and operated his own business, and he has also authored a book entitled 8 Insider Sourcing Secrets. So please welcome Peter Wincup.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Dorothy. You forgot my Nobel Peace Prize, but that's okay. I have been around for a while, and I've been fortunate to work. I spent a great deal of time in corporate life, chemicals and plastics, so what am I doing here? But a lot of time then in consulting, where I worked with the government. I worked with Compaq before it was purchased by Hewlett-Packard, worked with McElhaney, the Tabasco people, worked with the Chickasaw Indian Nation, an array of clients. So I had a chance to look at the way they operate. And then the last 10 years as an entrepreneur, really exploring and developing the idea of a GPO and the GPO program. What I'd like to do with you this morning is treat as though you don't know what a GPO is, and let's start from scratch. What is it? How does it work? What's the legal entity? How does it do what it does? Then let's talk about it, what's in it for you. You know, what's the advantages for you, your practice, your business? Then I'm going to kind of slide into, the GPOs. They're not all the same. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the GPOs that are in this market for information's sake. And then I'm going to talk to you about the GPO I chose and kind of how I got there. I'm going to show you some price examples. Keep in mind that the prices are confidential, but I'm going to show these to you. I'm going to talk to you a little about the things that you can get from a GPO. I've left on your table a wish list that I kind of leave with customers when they first start with a GPO, and we'll talk about some of those. And then I'm going to make an offer to you, and then I'm going to stick around and answer as many questions as you have, as long as you wish for me to stay. So, with that, let me jump off and get into this and tell you really what is a GPO. GPOs are group purchasing organizations. The legal entity, in essence, is a purchasing cooperative, just like the farmers' co-ops that you knew about growing up. Same idea. It's an entity owned by the members. Some of them are purchasing consortiums, which is essentially an operation owned by an individual. Some of them are now publicly held. They've got big enough. They've gone public and all that. But the basic business is a purchasing cooperative with immense purchasing power. And what I'm going to talk to you about here throughout is, for those of you that buy, purchasing is all about leverage. It's all about the leverage you have in the marketplace. If you don't have leverage, let's face it, you just can't get the best price in the marketplace. GPOs are a way to get there. GPO organizations in general, and the business concept, if you will, there's no fee for a member to join. Any healthcare provider can join a U.S. healthcare GPO. Many of them have no contract commitment. Many of them have no purchase requirement minimum. So literally, it's risk-free for you. Many of them, well, the income in general, I should speak to, from this this business concept. GPOs make their money, since they don't take a fee from the client. They make their money by getting a fee from the supplier on the contract to the GPO when they sell something to the member. You buy some copy paper from a GPO office supplies supplier. At the end of a quarter, that GPO supplier sends between 1% to 3% to the GPO. It's capped at 3%. It's capped there by the Medicare Medicaid law. So, and each contract varies, but it's never more than 3%. There's a couple of industries that really take good advantage of the GPO business concept. The first is the federal government. I discovered this doing some consulting work for USAID. That the U.S. government is a huge user of GPOs. The General Services Administration, the office supplies deals the government has, it's a GPO that is essentially established to support them. The U.S. healthcare industry, and again, I think it's one of the smartest ideas I've ever seen in my business experience, have taken real advantage of GPOs, but kind of to date, it's been restricted to the hospital level. And there isn't a hospital really that doesn't belong to a GPO, one of them. But when you start drifting into the other classes of trade, long-term care, CCRC, SNFs, ALFs, and certainly independent physicians, they've kind of said, what do you mean, what's a GPO? And I can't join. Yes, you can. You are welcome as a member of a GPO. And part of my mission this morning, if you will, is to convey to you that your business would be very much welcome in a GPO. Your business as a provider. As a vendor, something like this, I can't do it. I can't support you, joining. But as certainly a MOROF provider member, absolutely. So having said that, what's in it for you? First of all, I mentioned it has immense buying power. It also has a huge number of contracts. A GPO basically is a third-party buying organization. It goes out and negotiates contracts, multi-year, generally 3-year, on behalf of its members. The contracts are set up, in price tiers, which I'll describe to you a little bit, but they virtually cover everything from a clinical or non-clinical base, anything you'd want to buy for your practice. I say from cotton balls to escalators. Anything that you would be looking for, say one item. And Mitchell, they do not offer healthcare insurance from the Premier program. Premier programs are all national. To be a Premier supplier, you have to offer your product, your service, your supply, your equipment in all 50 states. So they've never found a healthcare provider that could do that. GPOs have what I call Google-proof pricing. I know many of you are really savvy when it comes to the use of a laptop or your smartphone and Googling things. You could Google all week and never find a GPO price. They just simply are not available. And in fact, when you join a GPO, about the only commitment that you make, I'd say in the good GPOs, is that you keep the pricing confidential. It has to stay between you and other GPO members in that GPO. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain it as we get along here. Now, having said that is Google-proof pricing, and what's Google-proof pricing, what's a GPO pricing? I've seen over 90% discounts. I've seen 30, 40, 50% common discounts. Most of the contracts are structured, the price tiers are structured as discounts off of a price list, which that's the big reason you can't find a GPO price. They don't exist. But the members and their name is attached to a price tier, and that's the price they get. Explain more about that. But how does a GPO do this? I mean, how are they allowed to get away with this? And the fact is, U.S. business is still governed by the trustbusters laws or the antitrust laws of the late 1980s, early 1890s. The Clayton Act, the Sherman-Patman, Robinson-Patman, and the FTC in this case. And in fact, those laws say that, Dorothy, if you're one buyer and Dan, you're another buyer, and I'm a seller, and I want to give you a lower price than I'm going to give Dan, there's only 2 ways under the law that I can do that, which I think is very interesting. Now, if you're an attorney, you're going to say, Wincup, you're making this much too easy, and you're probably right. But essentially, I'm correct in what I'm telling you. The first is, Dorothy, if you show me a competitor's invoice, I can meet that price. Perfectly legal for me to do that. A lot of buyers will say, well, I got the price, they don't show the invoice. If the seller accepts that, that's okay. But the law says you got to see the invoice. A lot of business transactions, a lot of buying is done this way. The other is to simply say that, Dorothy, if in my selling you, the product or the service that I'm going to sell you, if you're able to save me costs in the way I'm going to supply you, I'm allowed to pass those costs back to you as a price decrease. So if I don't have to inventory for you, have a warehouse, if I don't have to have a salesperson calling on you, if I don't have to advertise, any kind of an expense like that that reduces my cost of operation, I can pass to you in the form of a price decrease. Perfectly legal. Now that has been the expanded, understood definition of that is if you're going to buy more than I am, if you're General Motors or General Electric and you're going to buy a gazillion of this item and I'm going to buy one, you're going to get a better price than I am. Everybody understands that. Well, this is where that comes from. That's also how a GPO works. A GPO represents the total value of its client base spend. So when they talk to a contract supplier, they say, we've got all these members and they spend $20 million annually in office supplies. So when they sit down and talk to them, this is what I'm bringing to the party. Now what's your proposal? That's how it works. Now from a standpoint of what's in it for you, from my experience, the easy part's joining a GPO. The tough part is using it. And that just simply is access when you have a question. You don't want to say, I'm not going to join every contract that I can, but gee, my boss just said to me, I got to buy a widget. Well, where do I go to buy a widget? Well, if you belong to a GPO, that's one phone call. Say, okay, Wincup, who supplies widgets from the GPO program? And I tell you who the suppliers are. But it's local support, and that's going to be expanded to include your MOROF representatives as we get more familiar with each other. So, it's always interesting to me to learn how people buy. And if you're the buyer in your organization, these are probably some of the methods that you go about. And I'm assuming for a moment at this stage you don't belong to a GPO. So you're on your own. You Google for vendors. You may go to Costco or Sam's. You buy more than you need, more product than you need, but you get the price and you bring it back. You talk to your distributor rep and say, I need to purchase this. What's the price? You ask another associate, another practice. You got somebody that you use, or can you give me a lead just to help me out? And more often than not, you wind up negotiating with a sales representative. Well, that's your time. And each of those take time. And your time is valuable. And one of the beauties of the GPO process is it's one phone call, one email. And then you get a call back and says, here's the supplier, and we'll have them contact you, whatever it is. And then you get access to this Google-proof pricing. I would underscore, and will continue to underscore, these Google-proof prices that we'll talk to you about where a GPO is concerned. You're never going to get them if you don't join a GPO, period. Not going to happen. You have to belong to a GPO to have access to GPO pricing. Now, not all GPOs are the same. And in fact, GPOs are in the vogue right now. A lot of companies are starting up, supplies companies, they call themselves GPOs because it's in vogue. I thought it appropriate to share with you the people that have a track record, and the names that you'll know in this marketplace that are GPOs, just for your own background and your own information. Premier, which happens to be the one I represent, I'll speak to a little bit later. Novation, excellent company, one of the largest spends, $49 billion they advertise in member spend. So certainly one of, if not the largest in the marketplace. MedAssets, I believe MedAssets says that they are in 4 out of every 5 hospitals in the United States. That's their advertising claim. They are also publicly held like Premier. But if you notice the spend, if you ask about MedAssets, they'll tell you our income's about $50 million. But when you dig into it and say, well, what part is the GPO portion? That's $28 million. So MedAssets, again, good operation, doesn't have the leverage, doesn't have the spend power of some of the other GPOs. HPG, another good but smaller, focuses on hospitals. HPG requires a commitment. you're going to be an HP, that's Health Trust Procurement Group, is the name of the, and I find them in South Florida, quite some. You're going to have to commit. You're going to have to commit to put 80% of your business with that GPO. And it may well be a contract you sign with them. That I don't know for certain. But again, in this marketplace, in a recognized GPO. Amerinet is a name that you may well know. Amerinet, I find them in nursing home facilities in the area. Excellent sales force, really good representation. They are, if you'll note, they're a $9 billion GPO. Yeah, that means the leverage isn't there that the larger ones have. So Amerinet typically, I would look at, or they would be introduced to me as a second tier GPO, which just simply says they're the other GPO. You know, you may belong to a Premier or an Ovation, but you also, because you have special nursing groups or something like that, you'd like to belong to Amerinet also. So you have the second GPO that you belong to. MHA, Managed Healthcare Associates. One of the best in the industry, but highly specialized. They're essentially, they provide pharmaceuticals to pharmacies. So retail pharmacy, no, forget Walgreens and all that, but a customer that's got a pharmacy operation and they're probably doing business with MHA or one of the other ones, and they're very, very good. Can't say anything but give them praise. Form purchasing, the name comes up occasionally. They focus on the long-term care industry. $1.25 billion. I don't hear their name that often, but I thought I'd mention their name to them. All reputable GPOs, though. So if I kind of walk away from this part about what I'd like to leave with you when I talk about GPOs in general is, number one, you can't get a GPO price without belonging to a GPO. Can't happen. Number two, when and if and when you decide to join a GPO, here's some things I would ask you to consider, that I think work for you. Number one, join a GPO that has no fee to join. Most of them are this way. Occasionally you'll find one, but there isn't any reason that you'd have to pay a fee to join a GPO. Number two, get a GPO that has multiple suppliers, that offers a number of suppliers for any one item, service, equipment that they offer, simply so that whatever you're buying right now, the supplier that you're using, chances are good that the supplier will also be in the GPO program. So that all will happen via behind-the-scenes change, and you then start getting the GPO price. But look for one that has multiple supplier choices. Look for one that has multiple price tiers. And I'm going to talk about this a good deal more. But essentially, if we go back to this, the description of how legally it's set up under the antitrust laws, the price tiers are tied to priced volumes. Or excuse me, purchase volume. 0 to 250,000 is usually considered tier 1. And that simply means that if you purchase $25,000 of an item, when you go to join a GPO, you're going to be buying in tier 1. And in all probability, and what I will tell you again later, is most people spend their life in tier 1 because they just don't have the volume to get up. But we have a solution for that. And that there's no contract and no minimum volume commitment. I really feel strongly about this. The application that I like is called a letter of participation. It's a statement of intent. It says the customer contemplates doing this. There's nothing there that says I authorize this. There's no contract commitment. So use it, don't use it. When you join, if you don't buy anything for a year, that's okay, not a problem. Except that you just probably threw away an awful lot of money on what else you've been buying. But it's what I would encourage you to look for when you join a GPO. About 6 years ago, an associate of mine that was mentioned earlier, Ken Peach, with the Health Council of East Central Florida, came to me and said, Pete, I want to form a GPO for my health council. Will you build this GPO for me? And I had some experience, and I said, yeah, I'll do this. So first thing I did is go out and find, start looking around the healthcare industry. because I quite honestly didn't know that much about it. Well, I very quickly found out there's a heck of a lot of very good GPOs. So I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, it was just, it very quickly became, we just need to find the right GPO. So I really did a pretty exhaustive search. And that search led me, and Ken, as it turned out, to the Premier GPO program. And let me tell you why. Premier is now publicly held. A year ago, they did an IPO. Up to that point, they were strictly member-owned. They became very, very cash-rich. One of these, over a 2-week period, they made a gazillion bucks when they hit the market and all this. But it's also changed their life. They're now investor-focused and not enough member-focused in my book. But they have in excess of $40 billion. I can't tell you exactly what their purchase volume is because now they're a publicly held corporation, so it's closed information. But they're up there in the colored lights. They have over 3,000 hospitals, way over 100,000 members of post-acute and a lot of different kinds of other classes of trade. 1,600 supply agreements. And I mean, that's one contract, for sutures. And there may be, 3 dozen sutures mentioned in the contract. I literally have never had a member ask me for something that Premier didn't offer it. And not only did they not offer it, but they had multiple sources for it. I mean, the one that comes to mind, the medical examiner in one of the counties joined, and he said, we use body bags. I mean, they don't walk in, when we get them, they're laying flat. So he said, you guys have body bags? I said, I have no idea. Checked Premier, 6 suppliers of body bags. So they are an exclusive GPO user of one of the body bag programs. The multiple agreements for an item. I noted 7 suppliers for exam gloves. I did some checking. Now they have 10 suppliers for exam gloves. Now what that means to you, if you were to join the Premier GPO for your practice, chances are really good that whatever exam glove your physician and your staff are using right now, it's on the contract. So all that happens is you tell me, I want to have that on the contract. I go through the behind-the-scenes thing, and the next time you buy, you're buying at a GPO price. They have 550 vendors. That's probably closer to 600 right now. Again, they're national agreements because all the products have to be available in all 50 states. That's good, and that's not good because there's a lot of good regional programs, and I will address that a little bit later. But that's the way Premier works. They have multiple price discount tiers tied to volumes. I explained the idea of the price tier. Tier 1 is sort of 0 to 250,000. Tier 2 is 250 to 500,000. Contracts go up to 7 to 9 tiers. And obviously the hospitals are buying up there at those high tiers because they have that price, they have that purchase volume. But the key to you is, and I'll explain why, is you want to have access to a GPO that has multiple price tiers so that you have the opportunity to move up when the opportunity presents itself. Now, big plus, cannot underscore this enough where the Premier GPO is concerned, they allow aggregation. Has anybody ever heard that term or used in the? Yeah, pretty simple term. What it really means is that I, as a Premier affiliate sponsor, am allowed to aggregate all the volumes of the members in my group. So instead of one single practice, I have the composite. I have the total of the purchase volume of my membership, which then says, okay, now we have the opportunity maybe at Tier 2, then get you better pricing. Tier 2, by the way, means that the discount improves. And as you go up, the discount continues to improve. Let me tell you how aggregation works for you with Premier GPO in my program. There are about 30 affiliate sponsors, and I'll kind of show you a slide of what a sponsor, where it fills, but that's what I am. And I'm the one that calls on you, or I'm available to you. Premier sits up there, this huge umbrella organization, with a gazillion dollars taking place, and they, their attention goes to the big dollar, the hospitals and the hospital groups and things like this. Well, 6 years ago I started, Ken Peach's request started this, and we started with zero. We didn't have an account, not a thing. So as of about 4 years ago, I had garnered sufficient accounts that Premier said, okay, now we're going to kind of bring you into the fold a little bit. So they introduced me to the third largest sponsor in the entire Premier network. And this sponsor has $650 million of annual spend, plus more. Now, what that means to you is now not only as a member of our group, but now we include Alliant Purchasing's group, all $650 million. Now you're buying in tier 3, 4, 5, all the way up to tier 7. Couldn't do that on your own. Can't do that with most other sponsor operations, quite honestly. But it all means better discounts for you. I don't care if you're buying one set of forceps, you're buying one box of business cards. I don't care if you're, whatever it is, you're going to get essentially the leverage in the Premier GPO equivalent to $650 million. That's a big plus. What Alliant Purchasing, my sponsor partner, and by the way, I'd almost hoped that one of them would be here. They're based in Louisville and have an operation in Austin, and they couldn't make it, but they're over here quite often. But they also offer regional contracts. Alliant Purchasing is a GPO within the Premier GPO program. I told you those regional groups that it seems to make sense, that we should have, because they offer something that the national can't offer. Alliant writes programs with them. Those programs also become available to you. If you'd like just to look at what those are, if you go to alliantpurchasing.com and then click on links, it'll take you right to the list of contracts. That list is always growing, but it'll take you right to the list of contracts. They also assist me enormously in customer support. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes things that happen in the GPO world that I couldn't effectively make happen because I'm just a voice calling Charlotte, North Carolina, where Premier is. I work through Alliant. So when you sign an application to join, that used to be a 2-week process for me to get a membership back. 1 day. I get response immediately. If you are considering joining the Premier GPO and Alliant, my group, and say, I'd like to know what your pricing is first. Here's half a dozen items we buy. What's your price? We call it a market basket. Happy to do it. I go to Alliant. They come back and give me the price of those 6 items. I would tell you right now, I've never lost one. Never lost one. The pricing is that good. They help a lot in just simply the customer support process, which I'll explain a little bit more, but this process behind the scenes that takes place. And I have a representative that's assigned to me. So if I get hit by a bus, they're there to pick up the fold, if you will. So we're getting deeper and we're getting bigger. This next slide is really to kind of demonstrate kind of how sponsors Premier work. Premier is this huge entity of way over 100,000 clients in the United States. By the way, U.S. only, doesn't market anywhere else in the world. They market through sponsor group. I mean, you've never seen an advertisement on Premier, Novation, or they don't advertise. They don't really have sales forces. Premier goes to the market solely through people like myself. And what I do, so why you perhaps never heard of them? Well, that's why. I just haven't gotten around yet. But let me tell you, the word's getting out. But all the marketing or the customer contact, if you will, is done through sponsor groups, but Premier also maintains a customer service center by phone, which also is there to answer questions. But it's really that simple. And again, there's about 30 sponsor groups with a Premier GPO in the U.S. I think I told you I was by far the smallest, and now I'm kind of, I'm getting up in the colored lights just by association. Talk's cheap. So I promised to show you some examples of GPO pricing. And because it's confidential, I can't show you the manufacturer and I can't show you the part number. But I can say, here's the item and here's the GPO price. If you're interested, just let me know. I'll tell you every one of those items and more, what the GPO pricing is. Ask you to keep it confidential, at least until you, hopefully you become a GPO member. But it's an idea of what kind of leverage and what kind of price you can get. I think it's in your handout so you can take it back to your practice and check some of those out. See how they compare to what you're buying. Now, I would make one comment. The clinical items on this list do not have the distributor fee in them. And the U.S. healthcare industry in the clinical segment, it has been designed or set up so that you will deal through a distributor, or the supplier will deal through a distributor to you. Distributor provides you excellent service. They also charge you a fee. So that the price you see right now doesn't have a distributor fee on it. That would be added on. Now, my suggestion to you is, and you do, and they all provide excellent service. They were very fine salespeople. And we'll speak a little bit more about that later, but do you know what the fee is you're charged? Do you know what right now, what your McKesson PSS, your Medline, your Philips, do you know what they're charging you? Because you should know. They should put it on your invoice. And if they aren't, ask them to. So you have some idea, because quite honestly, you can go bark at them. You say, wait a minute, you're charging me that much just because you're, we stop in once every other week and, we order supplies from you, I pay you that much? I think we need to talk about it. You can work on that. Because in general, most of those guys are independent business people, and they can negotiate their prices. I left on your table what I called the wish list of programs that are available through the Premier GPO specifically. And I just kind of wanted to highlight some of them for you. The cell phone program, always one of the 10 top most popular programs in the Premier GPO program. They have a program with AT&T and Verizon. They give you a discount off of your cell phone package. It's in excess of 20%. I don't tell anybody else that. Both of them. And all you need to do to have access to that is join the GPO. No question, one of the most popular programs. Copiers and fax machines, everybody kind of slides over that. It's Ricoh, Konica, and Xerox are the three contracts they have. If you have one of those monsters in your office, where you're making copies, and the lease is coming up, the contract is coming up on it, think about joining a GPO immediately. Because you join the GPO, all of a sudden, that new contract, you're wholly different pricing structure. Now you're a GPO member, Premier GPO member. You get a different contract when you sign up. In fact, I haven't. My Alliant Purchasing had a fellow sign up just because of that. He said, I couldn't believe the savings he was going to get on the monster that he had. Computer hardware and software. There are about 6 suppliers, 3 that are used more often than not, PC Connection, Zones, and CDW. If you're dealing with any of them, you join the Premier GPO, and all of a sudden you start buying, I think CDW, as I recall, is Tier 4 discounts. So you're buying iPads, you're buying anything in your practice, you need to replace computers, anything like that, an immediate advantage for you. Exam room furniture, new and used. My very first client, 6 years ago. Yeah, 6 years ago, my very first client, I've never met him, was down in way below Kissimmee, brand new out of med school and opening his practice. And literally within 2 weeks of opening his practice, he hadn't bought a thing. No table, no furniture, nothing. He didn't have anything. And heard about him, put him in touch with one of the distributors and said, now you're a GPO member. And he outfitted his entire office using the GPO. And he told me over the phone, he figured somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the price he would have had to pay by belonging to the GPO and outfitting his office. Vaccine programs, a highly used program in the Premier GPO portfolio. Physicians need vaccines. And I want to say it's Glaxo, Merck, and Sanofi. They're the three that they have contracts with. Anybody that provides food service to their customer base, Premier GPO and U.S. Foods have the top best food service program in the industry. Nobody will argue with that. Premier buys the food. They write all the contracts for all the food, and U.S. Foods distributes it. It is, I've never seen them lose a piece of business when they were able to make a proposal to a hospital, a large organ, anybody that is using food. And there's well over 1,500 more, but these are some of the more popular ones. So if you join a GPO, how does that change your life? You know, what are you now doing different than you were doing before? And really, nothing. If you want to buy a clinical item, you call your distributor representative. And you just tell them, I'm a member of the Premier GPO. As a Premier GPO member, you're assigned what is called an entity code. It's a six-digit number. Within 2 weeks of your being approved, that number is in the hands of every supplier in the Premier system. So when you use that number on the phone or in the email when you're corresponding with a supplier, they know exactly who you are. And you just place the order with your distributor rep if you like the price. And I want to underscore this to you. Just because you belong to the GPO, you don't have to buy from the GPO. You know, the GPO may offer the better price, but you may choose to use a local supplier or for your own reasons deal with someone. Not a problem. You just know what the price penalty is because you have the option of looking at the GPO program, but you don't have to buy. So I always tell anybody, if you like the price, then go ahead and take advantage, deal directly with that supplier. I would comment kind of where the distributor rep is concerned a little bit here. They're excellent salespeople. You pay for the service. One of what I have seen happen in the marketplace some, though, that I would call to your attention is the representatives are incented to push particular programs that distributor is pushing. And you may be on the Premier GPO program, for instance, and have access to this price, and lo and behold, you find you're actually buying something else over here because it was on their incentive to do that. So when you become a GPO member, check, ask, am I getting the GPO price? Is that in this, what you're delivering to me? And if it isn't, explain to me why. If you want to buy a non-clinical item, again, it's easy too. The first call, you know, is an email or a call to me, said, Wincup, I want to buy a computer. Who are the Premier suppliers for computers? And I will tell you and let you choose whether you want to talk to all three probably or one or two of them, and then I will either have them contact you directly or give you contact information so you contact them. You talk to them, get the GPO price. If you like it, buy from them directly. You know, if not, at least you have a basis for comparison. Now, the reason that I ask you to contact me, and very soon contact a MOROF representative, Alliant Purchasing has negotiated because of its volume, you know, its leverage. You're buying in the upper tiers. Your distributor rep or the supplier that you're talking to initially may not know that, may not know that you're aligned with Alliant Purchasing. And so they won't offer you the price in the higher tier. They just simply don't know it. So that's why if you let me know when I contact the supplier on your behalf, you know, to get the introduction, all this, I'll tell them they're related to Alliant Purchasing. So you should get the tier 4, tier 5, whatever price that is. I'm local. Obviously, MOROF is here. We want to support you in this venture. So, you know, use us. If you have an issue, you have a question. Example, I had a client 3 days ago call me and said, Pete, I'm going to get rid of my AT&T cell phone program. You know, I'm thoroughly upset with the way it's operating. And as it happened, they went in, they wanted to upgrade, so they went in the store and they bought the upgrade and they lost the package they were on, you know, on the particular deal that they had initially, but now they're paying a higher price. And they said, wait a minute, what happened? Well, I called the Premier AT&T representative, account manager. They still are getting their discount, the plus 20% that I was telling you about, but they just simply lost their deal, you know, because they essentially wrote a new contract, you know, for the new phone. What we're able to do, we've got stroke. So the representative, and then I gave the GPO member sales management 2 or 3 levels higher than the person they're talking to right now. The phone companies are enormously sensitive to customer service, and they're really unhappy when they have a customer that's unhappy with them, and they will do almost anything to make you happy. So I think they're going to get a discount, get a credit, you know, that'll smooth things out. We can do that from a GPO perspective, but quite honestly, if you tried, you wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm going to wrap it up. I really have appreciated your time. In closing, I have a very few things to say to you. First, number one, today I'm extending a personal invitation to all MOROF provider members to join the Premier GPO. If you'd like to join, and again, it's exactly as I structured for you, no contract commitments, no minimum quantities, no fee, essentially no risk. If you'd like to join, there is simply an application to complete. You know, your MOROF representative will have that application. You can contact me. I have a couple with me. It's easier probably to send them electronically to you, and you can fill it out. Seems like a number of pages, but in actuality, it's very simple to fill out. And then it just goes through the process of the approval process that is most recently taken 2 to 3 days. And I would underscore that because you can't get the GPO pricing anywhere else, this could be one of the smartest decisions you're going to make for your practice. And let me be more specific and personal. To the practice managers in here, if you want to be the all-star, if you want to take the lead in saving your practice more money than you can conceive, I can very confidently say if you don't belong to a GPO, you're looking at anywhere from a 15 to 20% savings annually on what you buy if you use GPO suppliers. That's a huge savings for your practice. And you're getting now the support also to assist you in this. The second I would add is if a physician was sitting in here, please join a GPO. Please join a GPO. You're getting hammered from all different directions in your practice. Just trying to make your profitability is a real challenge these days. Join a GPO. I'd like you to join the Premier GPO, and we'll welcome you. But join a GPO, number one. Number two, use it. If you're going to join and say, well, I joined the Premier GPO, and so fine, but it's not going to do any good. You got to use it. You got to simply find out, and it's just usually initial phone calls to get a price. If you buy a computer and you buy it from a particular GPO supplier, I make the introduction. The next time you want to buy, hardware, you go ahead and deal with them directly. I don't need to get involved at all. One of my charges is I really want to help independent physicians stay independent. That's part of what I'm doing in business. To that extent, I'm at your service. My title is Chief Savings Officer. That's what I do. That's what I've done for the last 6 years in this industry and 10 years so before that. And I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Pete, thank you. It's very good information for practice managers. And what is the procedure and the requirements for a vendor to be part of any GPO?
The Premier GPO, you would have to offer your product nationally, and not all do that, quite honestly. To the extent that you want to offer the product regionally over a broad region, then I would say I would put you in touch with Alliant Purchasing. If you want to offer your product locally, I'd probably put you in touch with Ken Peach. His health council has a GPO, and that's essentially just putting an agreement together on, if he introduces you, what percentage, and it's, again, within that range I've defined for you. That'd be my suggestion to you.
And there are also member-to-member discounts and benefits from the local vendors here as well, because as you mentioned, there are certain things that price may be the most important, or it may be, I need this service or this extra attention to whatever, and this is still a fair price, and all of those sort of factors that go into it. So it's a great combination between the two. And as you kind of mentioned, this provides leverage. I know I'm not a good Timothy Hutton, but anyway, more questions on that. Gail, you had one?
Well, I have a comment to make. I used to work for Verizon for 5 years in the business channel, and that was my biggest vertical, was the medical industry. And it's really that easy to sign up for it. And at Verizon, we gave a 22% discount.
You still do.
And we would take offices that have 5 employees and give them the buying power of 100,000. And it's not only a 22% discount, it was a different tier purchase on handsets that would normally cost $200 to $100, or sometimes they cost you nothing. But we prospected using Premier because, as he said, only AT&T and Verizon are members, but when you go up against the Sprint's and the T-Mobiles of the world that are super cheap, it would bring us right down in line. It literally would bring us price point down to line to them. And people would just be so like, are you sure? I don't understand what this is. It sounds too easy. It sounds like a gimmick. And we'd explain it exactly like he did. It's like a Costco. And it takes you from a 5-tier buying power up to 100,000. There's no meetings. There's no dues. There's no nothing. And I would go through and actually look through and see everybody that was members that they could buy through. And I had an office that had just opened up, and we signed people up all the time under it for you guys.
Thank you.
The rep no, seriously, the rep would be like, oh, I love this office. I love it. You guys are sending me business all the time. But they ordered all their equipment through it once they became members. So if you haven't looked into the program, you're really missing a huge opportunity to be saving money, and it would blow your mind to see what you're able to get discounts on.
I would just only comment, this is a 4GS. I bought it through Premier for 99 cents.
Yeah, and don't go into the retail stores because they're not trained on the actual GPOs.
That's right. They don't know what a GPO is.
That's why he lost it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to get it back on, though.
But what you can buy, and thank you for your comments, you can buy equipment. I mean, Premier, AT&T have a website. Verizon the same. You can buy equipment. Take the equipment, once you bought, it's shipped to you. Take it in the store, and they set it up for you. So it's a very cooperative arrangement.
Hey, Pete,
Yes,
you touched on it a little bit, but because we regularly call on medical practices, they're familiar with patient compliance or non-compliance. What I was struck by in talking with you and Ken Peach was even as they join, they slip into their old habits. Like they join the gym and then they don't go. What can you suggest we do to enhance, continually educate them on the utilization of that so they can save that 20% or more?
That's a great question, and it's one I deal with all the time. I would suggest 3 things. First of all, tell them that they are welcome, and we'd love to have them in a GPO, because many don't know that. Secondly, when they join, encourage them to use it. It doesn't do them any good if they don't use it. And to the extent the people that are really saving the money are the ones that are buying the majority of their goods through the GPO. I'd never say all, but they're buying the majority. You know, the routine stuff they're buying through the GPO. Thirdly, you really have to keep an eye on your distributor. They're excellent salespeople, and the industry has decided to use them. That's fine. Premier is distributor neutral. We deal with all of them. You know, when you sign up and join the Premier GPO, I'm just simply going to ask, who's your distributor? I didn't explain, and I should, but just to finish the answer to your question, be sure that if you're a GPO member, that you're getting the GPO price with the distributor markup. Okay, they do that, but you're getting the distributor or the GPO price, because there is a tendency to go with specials or something that they have another reason for sending to you.
Okay, we have another question.
Until I got on Medicare, I never even saw a doctor, but now I have a series that I see. If I see a doctor, can I ask him a question? Are you a member of a GPO? And if he says no, could I refer him to you?
Absolutely.
So it works that way.
Absolutely. Let me know, and I'll be very quick and very happy to follow up.
Any other questions? Oh.
Could you give me an idea? I'm Linda Johnston with USA Payroll. Could you give me an idea of how small the practice is that you could help with? A one-man practice, a one-doctor practice with a couple of PAs? Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
And they still would get the
They get the same price as the practice with 100 doctors. Because of aggregation, they get the same price.
That really helps a lot of us knowing where we need to go with this and how we can help some of the medical practices that we have. It makes a big difference.
Yeah,
Thank
I think
you
it's
so
an
much.
enormous opportunity. Thank you for the question. It's an enormous opportunity to help independent physicians, to just simply alert them to the fact that this is here and it's for you to use. Yeah, yes, sir.
Pete, I'm a general contractor, Rodney Douglas. When you were mentioning, and I was noticing on there about software and hardware and computer items and office supplies, on the, I know in MOROF we focus more on the medical industry, but what about, software or items such as estimating software and things like that? Is that part of the program that you have as far as like software, computer supplies?
I don't know. I would tell you that you have to be a healthcare provider to join the Premier GPO and most healthcare industry GPOs. Okay. There are some other GPOs out there. There's one in Cleveland. There's a couple. They're just starting to spring up in industry, and I think they are going to mushroom here very soon. But the direct answer to your question is probably, but I don't know.
Well, we do 60 to 80% of our business is medical industry, build outs and hospital stuff. And the other thing was on the office supply parts. Is that something that we order from the GPO or from the vendor and it's shipped from them?
The latter.
I'm thinking delivery time delays.
Yeah. No, if you're dealing with Office Depot today, for instance, they're one of the Premier GPO suppliers. All you do is tell me I want my Office Depot supplier on the GPO program. We go behind the scenes, and Alliant Purchasing helps me do that. It's essentially, it takes the provider's name, the GPO member's name, feeds it through Premier all the way to the supplier. So the supplier now knows that, when this member orders, they get this GPO price. You deal directly with the supplier. GPO, I don't get involved at all. Only if there's a problem.
Thank you, Peter. This has been great. We
My pleasure.
certainly
Thanks for your
appreciate
time.
it.
I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much. This really goes to show that and when you're looking at business, there's really two ways to grow its profitability. And one is to either get more coming in on the top line or decrease what's going out with all the expenses and all those sort of things. And this is a great way for people to have that as an option to get that leverage and buying power through the GPO or with any of the MOROF members and vendors that we have as resources here. So thank you very much for having that as a great benefit to our provider members.